So I mentioned earlier the pastoral experience that you bring to the table. So tell us a little bit about, especially your tenure there at First Pres in Jackson. What was the nature of that ministry?
Well, I started teaching at Reformed Theological Seminary in 1990, and I taught there 6 years full time. And then I was asked by First Presbyterian Church Jackson to come and be the senior minister there. And I was 35 years old. I'd never been a solo or a senior pastor before. It was one of the largest churches in our denomination, and I was scared about whether I should take the call. That was an important call in the denominational life and history, and so I really relied on my boyhood pastor and on the senior member of my theology department, Doug Kelly. I basically said to them, "You're going to tell me whether I do this or not." And Mr. Reed and Doug Kelly both said, "You need to do this." And so I went to First Pres in 1996. 17 of the happiest years of my life. I mean, I loved pastoring First Pres. Doesn't mean that there weren't hard days. Doesn't mean that there were days where I didn't think, what have I gotten myself into? But 17 really wonderful years. Oftentimes when I talk with friends that have had hard ministries, I just feel guilty because God was so good to me in that setting. He gave me a lot. There were a lot of older, wiser ministers on the staff when I got there that they kept me from stepping into problems all the time. So I served there at First Pres for 17 years, 1996 to 2013, and loved every minute of it and could have stayed there for the rest of my life. But again, the seminary asked me to come back. The man who had been the chancellor became medically incapacitated. And so I thought he would be there for the next 20 years because he's not much older than me. And so they reached out and asked if I would come back to the seminary. And again, I relied on the counsel of people that I respected. So Mark Dever, who likes the local church a little bit, I thought Mark would tell me not to do it because of the importance of the ministry in the local church. And Mark said, "No, I think you ought to go back to RTS and lead in that way." And Sinclair Ferguson, who's never given me advice in my life. I've known him since I was a seminary student in the 1980s. And Sinclair said, "If not you, who? If not now, when?" I mean, he's never given me advice in my life. And so that kind of advice, okay, I need to do this. And so I went back to the seminary. So I was at seminary full time, working in churches part-time, then at First Pres, full-time in the church, teaching part-time at the seminary, and then back at the seminary again.
Yeah, and Mark Dever's counsel to you doesn't entirely surprise me because what you're doing is you're training pastors. Now, of course, missionaries, counselors, others, but again, the bullseye of what you're doing every day. So, this podcast is called The Everyday Pastor. If anyone balks and says, well, he's not a pastor, no, what you were for almost 2 decades. And that's what you're doing every single day now is training the next generation of ministers of God's word.
Yeah, by God's grace, that's certainly what I intend to do.